Hi, everybody. We're just waiting for a few more people to join us, and then we'll begin in about 1 minute. All right, time to begin. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon to you, wherever you might be. Welcome to Workforce Wednesday, RSJ Swenson. My name is Eric Swenson. Glad you're here with us today. It's going to be a lot of fun, going to be really interesting, and as usual, we will have a lot of interactivity with you today, and we're looking forward to it. This isn't one of those professional, polished to a pitch, everything is perfect pre-recorded events. So we're always looking forward to what catastrophe will befall us, and that's okay. We'll figure it all out. Some announcements to make today. The information we're going to give you today is of what we think is true today. And as you well know, things are changing so rapidly right now. But as of today, this is going to be the best information we can give you. And then there's always going to be lots of questions about what about our county and what about our city and municipal rules. And if we had the time to be able to research every city and state regulation, we'd have to. So make sure, regardless of our advice, that you check with your city, your county, your municipality to make sure that's all effective. We have people participating today on this call from 14 states, and I don't even know how many counties, but it'll be fun to watch. So thank you for that. And then a reminder, as we always say, we're not lawyers. We have 3 of our great team today, our HR advisors, senior HR advisors, who have at least between the 3 of them and me, 70 years or so of experience in HR combined. And I won't tell you who has how many by individual, because that would not be good. But we're really good, but we don't practice law. And the advice we give you is best practices and things like that. But sometimes we'll have to tell you, especially if you call in with a question or you write a question in, that's legal in nature, not HR best practices. Want to make sure to also welcome our friends at Hoffman Brown and all the clients they have. A number of their people are participating as well. So always good to see our friends at Hoffman Brown. A little bit about me. I run RSJ Swenson. I've written a couple of books and I talk all the time. As anybody who works for me will tell you, I talk all the time. And then our 2 brands, RSJ Swenson and Tanzanite, work with more than 300 business clients in North America. And the reason I tell you that is to tell you this. The information we're going to give you is based on our experience of working with diverse sets of businesses of all sizes and all locations and on almost every industry. So a lot of people will say, gee, we're a private school. What are all the other private schools doing? Well, we can give you that information, but it's also relevant to find out what other businesses, regardless of industry, are doing. Because human resources at its best is absolutely agnostic. It's industry agnostic. So what applies in one place should always apply, and it's always good to hear best practices. So based on the research we've done, the work with the clients we're working with right now, I want to spend a few minutes talking about some of the issues up to the moment. I'll spend a few minutes talking about what's going on here. And then our 3 brilliant panelists will answer some questions that you guys have already submitted already. And then the scariest and most enjoyable part, we'll ask live questions. So you're welcome to enter your questions and we'll take a look at those and answer those the best we can. So up to the minute, some of the issues we're seeing in the workplace. The tactical challenge with return to work, and a lot of you had questions on that. We're seeing it still. We've done 3 webinars, issued white papers, done all this stuff, and there's still more questions and more challenges every day. Nothing stays the same, and we know that right now. Something that is particularly concerning to me, and I just posted a blog on it this morning, is the mental health issue. I'm starting to think this is becoming a major issue. I want to talk a little bit about that. Obviously, over the last few weeks, the need to talk about D&I, diversity and inclusion, has come to the forefront. I want to talk a little bit about state of the workforce, what's going on. Did you know the third quarter starts in 14 days? 14 days, third quarter this year. And one of the things I used to tell clients all the time is think about what you want to do in the next year, but things are changing too rapidly. And we're starting to tell people, what do we want to do in the next quarter? What do we want to accomplish over the next 3 months? Because long-term plans right now are up in the air based on every day-to-day change that's going on in our society. And then how do we make the new normal work? So let's talk about some of the technical challenges. Policies and procedures when reopening work. And then there's this question, can I do this or should I do this? And that's a question we're working with on a lot of our employers and a lot of businesses right now. Just because you can do something does not mean you should do something. And the specific issue I'm seeing right now is parents of school-age children who are working at home. And a question we get asked all the time is, well, can I make them come back to work, to the office? Yes, you can. The question is, should you? As we found, school tends to be the greatest babysitter / daycare of all time. And when kids are out at home, working parents have a real challenge. And I can't tell you how many clients and business partners and friends I have who have kids at home, and both parents are working, but both parents are also parenting, both parents are also trying to homeschool their kids, and both parents are trying to do this. And it doesn't matter if they're anything else, but we've seen statistics that show that people in that category, parents of school-age children or younger, are about 20% more stressed out about what's going on. And quite frankly, with my employees, I'm not going to tell my employees who have kids they have to go back to the office every day. It's just not right. Can you do it? Yes. But I think a lot of the calls that we're seeing right now are, can I do this? The answer is yes, but you should also think about the should I do this? Time to trash old HR myths. One of my favorite bad HR myths is you can never ask anybody about their personal life. Well, with the blending of work and personal right now, there is not a better time or a more important time to throw out that myth that you can't talk about things. So if you have remote employees, it is a natural and good question to say, how are you doing? How is your family doing? How are things? How's your routine at home? How do you feel? This is the most stressful time in the history of our lifetimes and among the most stressful ever. It's time to throw out some of those old HR myths. And it's time to put HR, actually, the human, back into human resources. There are a lot of leadership lessons coming from the tumult in our country. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But I got to tell you, the leadership skill that is most needed now among everybody who's a leader is empathy. There is nothing more important than leading with empathy right now, than caring for other people. Nothing more important. I mentioned mental health as a concern of mine. We have all been traumatized in ways that may have not even manifested themselves yet. All right, the same thing with PTSD, it comes later. And whether you know it now or not, this has been a traumatic experience. We've all experienced major trauma because of fear, because of the unknown. And it's not like another crisis or a personal problem where maybe you can go to work and get away from that personal problem. Or you have problems at work and you can go home and get away from that work problem. This trauma and this fear is now manifesting itself in people 24/7. There is no break from the concern. You go home and worry about your family's health. You worry about your health and those of your loved ones. Then you go to work. Is it safe for me to go back to work? Is my job in jeopardy? What's going to happen? So this is a 24/7. And again, I'm concerned a lot about, are we going to be able to supply the mental health support that's needed? And a statistic that just came out yesterday, half of workers are concerned about being exposed to COVID when they return to work. And they're fearing the loss of control and the unknown. We don't know what's happening, therefore we fear it. That's the reason people don't like change, because it takes us from the known, what we know, to the unknown, what we don't know. And we as leaders have to lead with empathy in helping our people go back from the unknown to the known, or what we do know. It's really important. And people have to make a decision right now. I need a paycheck, or do I stay at home and be safe? And there's risks involved. And the risks you see in people starting to go out to bars and outside and events and things like that, that's a calculated risk. But people returning to work have a choice to make. How much risk is worth my paycheck? And they're thinking about those things. So some of the solutions we're thinking about are, if you have an EAP, support it. If you have an insurance broker who provides an EAP, an employee assistance program for you, I would strongly recommend highlighting that with all of your employees. Be as flexible and empathetic as you possibly can. These are real concerns that people have real time right now. And then there's all sorts of little things you can do. There's these apps, Headspace, Calm, ClassPass, Snack Magic. Calm, I bought the app for my team last week. And it's an app that practices meditation. It helps you sleep better. It helps you, has calming music during the day. And they give you a discount. And it was like $60 a person or something like that. I don't know how many of my team is using it, but I know they appreciated it, and they appreciated the gesture. Snack Magic is a business. They're not a client of ours. They put together snacks for like $30 or $40 and send them to employees' homes. So maybe you offer snacks or things like that at the workplace. People miss that. Send it to their houses. And people say, well, that costs money. You're already saving money. You're not having Pizza Fridays. So there's money out there to be spent. And I strongly encourage you to encourage your employees to take time off. Even if they're going home for a day and not thinking about work, it's really important to take time off. We talk about that in the best of times. It's even more important now in the toughest of times. And again, all of these things to me show leadership with empathy, which I think is important. I don't want to spend a lot of time in diversity and inclusion. In a couple of weeks, we will have kind of a comprehensive live webinar on diversity and inclusion, the issue of Black Lives Matter, All Lives Matter, things like that. But some thoughts I have right now for you, and they're very basic thoughts, are you as an organization need to know what you stand for. Your employees probably need to know that. Find out what your employees need from you. Let them help you take action. A really good idea is a pulse survey, finding out what they need, what they're looking for from you. The one thing I do know that I have seen is that leadership over the last, I don't know how long, has been abdicated to business leaders. And you see some of the CEOs of major corporations, Visa, BlackRock, a lot of businesses are taking the lead on donating money, creating new programs, things like that. Business leaders are as important right now and as highly regarded as any time in history. So it's an opportunity for leaders to take a chance at that and take an opportunity to make that work. You can never go wrong by communicating. You can never go wrong by communicating. Asking people what they think, telling them what you think. And again, this is the one thing that I've been reading about and learning about, is it's not enough to diversify if you want to diversify, if you need to, if the people decision-making process don't have different perspectives. So if you have a group of people who are leaders who all think the same way, you probably are going to continue to think the same way. It's good to have different perspectives at your table. So, and again, same thing as before, if you lead with empathy, you're going to be much better. Stay in the workplace. Chief executive, organization, magazine, big website, does a CEO confidence index of current business conditions. And they just came out a couple of weeks ago, June 3rd. And over the past few months, obviously it went down, but it's starting to tick back up. CEOs are starting to have more confidence in what's going on in the business conditions. As of today, that's how they feel. So do we. The job market outlook, this is Manpower did a survey of about almost 8,000 businesses. This came out on June 10th, so a week ago, and found that for the third quarter and fourth quarter of this year, 17% of businesses plan to hire, 11% don't plan to hire, they plan to let go of people. 62% plan to keep their workforce level, and about 10% plan on, they're not really sure yet. So what that says to me is almost 80% of businesses right now are going to keep steady or add, which is a good sign. And then the sectors that are expected to hire are some that you would expect, like leisure and hospitality. They got hit about as hard as any industry could have. So they're expected to hire about 7% more people. Transportation going up, wholesale trade, construction, government always hires. Education and health services. They didn't segment out education versus health services. I suspect that most of that growth is going to be in health services. Non-durable goods manufacturing up, so those types of things. And then making the new normal work. You'll notice I'm not using the phrase post-COVID world, because there's going to be no post-COVID world until a vaccine is available and there's general acceptance of what risks are involved. So we're still going to be living in an uncomfortable transitional state probably for another year. It's going to get better. We're going to figure it out, but there's going to be no post-COVID world until we have that thing. Till we find a vaccine, till people are vaccinated, and we figure out how that works. But there is a new normal now, and it requires communication on behalf of employers. You have to have policies in writing and expectations up front. Don't wait for a problem to happen and then write a policy for it. You should be doing that the other way around. Get your policies in place, and then if there's an exception to the rule, you can figure it out. Stop assuming the old ways are going to come back. They're not. I got a jolt yesterday. I was watching a program and somebody said the traditional hotel breakfast buffet is gone forever. There will never be breakfast buffets again. Wow, that kind of shocked me. But those types of things are going to happen. There needs to be a transition to agility, digitization, and automation. And what I mean by agility is just because you make a pivot or a change right now doesn't mean that change is permanent. It might have to be reviewed and changed in 2 weeks. So you have to have the ability to make decisions quickly and then recognize if a decision doesn't work or no longer works, have to pivot as fast as you possibly can. That is going to be leadership for a while. There is no question that this happened in the Great Recession of 11 years ago. The businesses that moved earlier, faster, and more decisively succeeded more dramatically. I see no reason to not believe that in the future. And this so-called return is not a destination, meaning the next period of time is going to be an incredibly difficult time. I mean, think about this, in the next year and a half, we're going to navigate through a presidential election cycle. There's going to be economic challenges. There's going to be more social unrest. And to ensure your business is set up for success, focus on this stuff because it's really important. And there's a huge advantage right now. People are saying they're more concerned about their well-being more than ever. But employee engagement of businesses, as measured by Gallup, has never been higher. People who are at work, who have their jobs, appreciate what they're doing, they're more engaged, and they're more rooted to the mission of the organization than ever before. That is a huge advantage for you, to make sure you're doing the right things and having people help you get to you where you need to be, because that's the key to this. And as I said earlier, quarter by quarter. But again, you know what all of those things tell me again is you have to lead with empathy. That's the number one leadership challenge right now. The best leaders we see are those who are leading with empathy, whether that be political leaders, world leaders, local business leaders, anything. People with empathy are becoming the most effective leaders. All right, so that's kind of what's going on in the workplace, and our brilliant production team is getting ready to do a poll, and here it comes. What area in your company do you think you or your leadership team need to improve the most? And is that communication, empathy, D&I, or understanding all the new rules and regulations? Gotta put my glasses on to see these. Okay. Wow, I can see the results and you guys can't, so it's kind of fun for me. I'm not going to give it away. And here we go. Understanding all the new rules and regulations, clearly, well, not a clear winner, but it's up there. Communication, then D&I, then empathy. May I just say, as we start going to the introductions, you're never going to know all the rules and regulations. Don't guess. Don't pretend like you know it. We're learning new stuff every day, and we do this for a living. We do this full time for a living. Make sure, though, you understand basics and you have experts, whether they be an HR pro, a lawyer, a major advisor, who will find that out. What I'm finding is some of the most dangerous things right now are people who don't know the answer and they research it and think they get the answer. And that's really scary right now. So thank you for participating in the poll. And let's now introduce our HR team today, 3 of our great people. Michelle Long, Senior Workforce Strategist at RSJ Swenson, many, many years, but I'm not telling you how many, in the field of HR as a director level manager, generalist, all of those things. Stephen Springer, Senior HR Advisor. Stephen, and I think we're about 9 years together, if you want to say that. And Stephen has a significant amount of HR experience, banking related, property management, all those types of things. And then Devin Deshala, who is here, Senior HR Advisor. She is a veteran of the Department of Veterans Affairs, where she was in charge of the HR function at the VA in Westwood, California. And so she really knows a lot of federal laws, and she's also been certified as an HR professional in California. So they're going to answer the questions for you. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go through previously submitted questions. So when you registered, gave you the opportunity to ask some questions. Devin has grouped them into 3 questions, into 3 categories. So the first categories are preparing to open or reopen your business. So our first question is this: do the current LA County orders only allow business offices to reopen if they can't work remotely? In stage 3, what businesses are officially allowed to reopen? Devin?
Thank you, Eric. So first, I do want to direct you to a website, and we can send that out at the end, but it's www.publichealth.lacounty.gov. It's also on our website. Oh, and there it is in the slideshow. This is a great resource. One of the most important things you will find there are the LA County orders. I know that a large majority of the attendees today are from LA County, but there are also individuals outside of LA County and outside of California. So certainly you want to look for your public health local ordinances to help guide you in this. But for those in LA County, definitely go to this website, and you're going to find the reopening Safer at Work in the Community for Control of COVID. It's continuously updated as we enter into different stages. We're currently in stage 3. It was last signed a few days ago. So to answer this question of what businesses are allowed to reopen in LA County, obviously essential businesses have been able to maintain operations, but now lower risk businesses, lower risk retailers, manufacturing and logistics sector businesses, non-essential office-based businesses, indoor malls, shopping centers, hair salons, and barber shops. LA County has also approved the reopening of specific sectors and businesses per the state's guidance. And there's a long list that I won't go into right now, but definitely access that website. What's nice about the order is that as it's updated, it's highlighted as to what has changed. So you don't have to keep rereading all of it. And finally, note that in those orders, if your business is allowed to reopen, it will refer you to an appendix. I think they're at Appendix P right now. There's quite a few because they're tailored to each business. And those appendix give you a checklist of what you have to do to reopen, and then you post that at your business. And just lastly, on the website, in addition to these orders, there's also checklists, tools, and a lot of resources. So again, for LA County, use this resource, and for outside LA County in California, definitely check for your local websites that provide similar guidance.
All right, Devin, thanks. Next question What are the best practices for a phase-in approach to return employees to the office? Michelle, how about you on this one?
Thank you, Eric. The best practices, I'm going to parlay off of what Eric opened up with. And whatever you do, you're going to want to practice using empathy during this process. So the first thing you should establish is, are you going to open or not? The next thing you want to do is, what are your protocols going to be? And whatever you decide those to be, and that means, are you having everybody come into the office? Are you going to do it in phases? Are you going to have testing done prior to everybody coming into the office? Are you going to allow customers and vendors into the office? Are you going to take temperatures? How are you going to maintain a sanitized, clean environment? How are you going to set up the space so that you're monitoring that 6 feet of distance? All that should be looked at and decided, and protocols established and then communicated. And again, as you're deciding who you want to bring back into the office, you want to take a look at essential positions. You want to take a look at, do I really need everybody here? If it's something that you have a business where working from home really hasn't been feasible for you, some have been able to, but others haven't, you want to take a look at that. You also want to decide if you can establish a work from home practice and what that means. But again, taking a look at all of your employees, making those decisions, and communicating them. Another thing that Eric commented on was communication, communication, communication. This is a confusing time for everybody, and you want to be able to tell them, this is what we're doing right now. It may change. It may change in a week. It may change in a month. But for right now, we're going to try to bring everybody back into the office, and then you want to be open to answering questions and talking to people about their concerns about coming back into the office. So taking all of that into consideration would be a best practice. Is there anything, Devin or Stephen, that you think that you've come across that you would add to that?
No, I think, Michelle, you did an excellent job. I don't think you said communication enough. No, I'm just kidding. I think that is absolutely essential so that everybody is all on the same page about what the company is doing and what employees are going to have to do, the expectations for employees.
And I also don't think it needs to be a rushed approach. You can get it phased in. Not everyone needs a return. So you can have a thoughtful process just to make sure that you're doing the best thing for the company as well as the employee.
A lot of people are asking, I'm working remotely. How can I show my how hard I'm working and what a good worker I am to my bosses? And my recommendation is, like Michelle did, quote the boss favorably as much as you can when you're talking. That is an incredibly good way of getting ahead. Before we go to the next question, there is a Q&A button on your screen. If you have questions you'd like to ask, if something we've talked about begs another question, please do it. We've gotten a few questions already. So let's go to the next submitted question, which is, are there ways an employer can ask employees for flexibility in working arrangements? Are there ways an employer can ask employees, which is a different type of, that's a twist on a question. Stephen?
Thanks, Eric. So first I would determine what the business needs are at the time, and then how long the need for flexibility will last, and then determine how many staff members would be impacted. I would have a conversation with the impacted group to inform them of the need of flexibility. See if you can have volunteers. Hopefully I'll be satisfied that way. If not, possibly handle through a rotation, or worst case, do by assignment. But if you do by assignment, make sure that you're not, or your reasoning is not discriminatory or could be perceived as discriminatory. So make sure it's definitely thought through. If you need help in regards to doing that, reach out to us. We're more than happy to help you through that. But hopefully, in dealing with the situation, you can go with a volunteer or a rotation. You also probably will run into specific situations that each individual will have. So if there's a childcare issue that is part of the decision. You're going to need to talk to everyone one-off to kind of find out what would work for them, or if it is even a possibility for them. So, Devin, Michelle, did you have anything you would like to add?
Nope, did a great job.
Yeah, the one thing I will echo on that, Stephen, I thought that was great. And the other thing is that the key word here is flexibility. As much as a business, as much as you can instill flexibility into your business, try to do that. I mean, obviously you don't want to hamper your business, but as much as you can, try to be flexible during this time and when you set up your protocols. And the other thing is I think, with management, as you're showing flexibility, the employees will be more inclined to follow along as well.
It's a two-way street, and that's a good point.
Good. All right. We're starting to rehire furloughed employees. How should we decide who can return first? That's actually a good question, Stephen.
So ideally, if you had a guideline in regards to furloughing people, you should follow that guideline in returning people. I would make sure however, I'd make sure that the employers have a legitimate, non-discriminatory reason in choosing employees to return. Typically, it falls on seniority, operational needs, or documented past performance issues. But again, make sure that your reasoning is not non-discriminatory. I would go ahead and think about those, I guess, how you're going to go about doing it now. So you have framework in mind when you return people. And also, if it's challenged that everything was made up last minute, you can have proof that you actually had a thoughtful process in regards to handling the situation before. Like I said, typically, seniority will have your less chance of being perceived as discriminatory. So that's also a good way of bringing it back if you can. And looking at past performance issues, you need to make sure that your managers are consistent in regards to the practice of counseling employees. If you have one manager who is lenient and you have another manager who isn't lenient in regards to counseling, then you might have some issue of perceived discriminatory action. So look at a thoughtful process in regards to the business needs and how you can bring back people in the most thoughtful way that wouldn't be perceived as discriminatory or non-discriminatory. And also, Devin, Michelle, and I were talking yesterday, and a thought came up, Devin's thought came up, where employees need to take extra care to ensure that decisions about who is brought back into the workplace is not based on apparent higher risk of COVID complications. Don't assume that someone is not willing to come back just because they might be older or in a compromised condition.
Yeah. I want to throw something else in there as well, Stephen. Don't use this as an excuse to say, well, that employee wasn't very good. We won't bring that person back. This is not the time to do that. That should have been done before all of this started, or you start the disciplinary process after that happens. But that it just opens yourself up to a much bigger risk if you do that. Devin, Michelle, anything?
I would just add that I think Stephen covered all of it, but I would just add that I think it's important for companies to be transparent as well. So you certainly don't have to disclose all of your reasoning for who you're bringing back and in what order, but I do think that you can provide some context to your employees so that they feel like they understand, and that may appease some of their concerns so that they don't start drawing their own conclusions about why somebody was brought back and why they weren't brought back. So I think if you can do that, I know a lot of management decisions are kept somewhat private, and certainly you want to, be mindful of that. But if you can provide some transparency to employees, it goes along with what Eric was saying about empathy, right? Really caring about your employees and their concerns during this difficult time.
Great. Thanks, guys. Michelle, I'm going to use you for this one. Some of our employees are already nervous about the second wave of COVID-19. What should we tell them?
Well, I'm going to throw out your empathy term again, Eric.
This is how you get ahead in business. I'm so proud of you. And I saw that Devin did it too, but I forgot to acknowledge it.
You did. It's because it was good stuff. See?
Yes.
So, yes, employees are nervous about it, and so you do want to be aware of that. Managers are nervous about it. Business owners are nervous about it, and so you want to give them confidence, and you want to say it with confidence and conviction that you're doing everything that you're doing in the business to maintain a safe environment for them. Again, that goes along with what protocols you're going to set up should you decide to bring everybody back. Are you, again, how's the cleaning going to be done? Are you going to have sanitation wipes next to phones that are being used by multiple people, copy machines? But think it all the way through to try to give them as much comfort as you can. It's not going to be 100%. Don't expect that it will be. When we're dealing with fear here, you're not responsible and can't necessarily take all the fear away, but you want to give them the confidence to feel like, hey, I'm doing all that I can do for your safety. And then, as Eric also mentioned, that listening to your employees, asking them how they're doing, asking them what's happening, and how their days are going. Again, you don't need to get too personal with them, but trying to get an understanding of where they're coming from, and then throwing in that, what we've already talked about, flexibility. What can you do to maintain the business but still have some flexibility inherent in your protocols and policies, so that you're showing that you have an understanding of where we are. Also, again, I'm going to get you again, Eric, the new normal. This is the new normal, so this is the way that businesses are going to now have to start looking at their policies and practices.
No question about it. Okay, Michelle, thanks so much. The second series of questions was categorized in remote work. And there's always lots of questions on remote work, and this is going to be never ending. So the first one is, what topics should be covered in a remote working policy? Devin, I just want to let you know you're not verbose, but can we keep this under like 6 hours? Because we could cover like a million topics. Maybe we should just go for what should be the major topics covered.
Should we have a separate webinar on this? No, I'm just kidding, Eric. So yeah, I think a lot of companies that initially switched to remote working at the end of March, it was kind of a mad dash. Let's just get our employees home. And I would say most companies didn't really have a remote policy in place. They were on-site employers. They never really had a need for employees to work off-site. And now, as we're coming up on the 3-month mark, at least for LA County, and the new normal, it's pretty clear that remote working is here to stay. So I think right now it's really important that companies put together a very thoughtful policy regarding this. I'll quickly give you some highlights of what should be covered, but I will say that this is going to be a policy that you're definitely going to want legal review on. Just like any policy in a handbook, you want to make sure you've got an attorney's set of eyes on this just to double check. Some things to think about, though, in these policies is first eligibility. You want this policy to grow with you as well. So right now, certainly right now, it's going to be the majority of your workforce because of COVID. But in the future, when it's no longer COVID, since we can't say post-COVID, you may have certain positions that it may benefit the employee to be working remotely. So what are some of the eligibility requirements? You'll want to talk about equipment. What do you need employees to have? What are you as the organization going to supply? Are you going to have them sign waivers of the material of the equipment before they take it? Laptops, extra screens, printers, even paper. Are you supplying them paper? You'll want to talk about reimbursement for internet and for cell phones, right? In California, the law is pretty clear that if you require an employee to work remotely, which is what's happening right now with COVID, you are responsible to reimburse your employees to a certain extent for internet and cell phone. If after this time period it just becomes a voluntary thing, you may not have to reimburse them. Other things, the security of information. How are you protecting sensitive information when it's off-site? Safety of employees, how to make sure they are set up properly at their workstations to avoid any kind of workers' comp claims. And then a couple other items to consider is, how are you going to track their performance? Are employees going to be submitting their projects to you? Are you going to have more frequent check-ins with your employees? And then the last piece is tracking time. And that's one of the questions that we'll talk about towards the end of this presentation. But making sure you're holding your employees accountable to their work schedule, right? And they're also, whether it's clocking in, sending in a timesheet, taking meal and rest breaks, and letting you know if they work overtime. So making sure you've got a good grasp of employee time. I'm sure there are more topics, but this is just kind of the highlighted list. Michelle, Stephen, anything else you want to add?
The one other thing that I thought as you were talking is maybe consult with your insurance broker to see if there's any specific insurance coverage that might be applicable to them working from home. You brought up security, so I'm thinking maybe there would be some cyber whatever, or hacking, or some prevention in regards to coverage for that. Workers' comp comes to mind. I would just check and see from your insurance broker what possible coverage or what other things might be applicable. Michelle, did you have anything else?
No, I agree with all those. I think you did a really good job with a full umbrella approach to this.
I can tell you that a number of clients I've talked to in the last couple of weeks are starting to get really concerned about work comp issues for remote work, because they can't control what the home space looks like, things like that. It's a big challenge. So thanks. Okay. What are some best practices for ensuring remote employees are compensated appropriately and adhere to meal and rest breaks given the rise in wage and hour claims? And I'm going to give this to you, Devin, and I'm going to throw you a mini curveball. The first question we got on the Q&A was, we have non-exempt employees working from home. Do we have to keep track of breaks and lunch? And if so, how do you suggest? So
absolutely. Oh, sorry, Eric. Absolutely, exclamation point, exclamation point. So, before COVID, we definitely were seeing a rise in wage and hour claims. And for those of you unfamiliar with that term, wage and hour claims are when an employee files a claim against an employer because they were not compensated appropriately, whether it's for minimum wage, they worked overtime that they didn't receive compensation for, lots of variations, but under the same umbrella of compensation. And so that's only going to continue. So certainly as we have employees working remotely, it makes it even harder to track employee time and attendance. Before, you could see when employees were there, and now they're at home and you're not able to see that and monitor that. So first, kind of back to that question I just answered, make sure you have a remote work policy in place. But I think the bigger, concern here is that you have an accurate way of tracking employee time, especially for your non-exempt employees, so that you can make sure that they are receiving appropriate overtime, taking their meal and rest breaks. So if you've got timesheets, make sure that they're certifying timesheets and sending them to you on a daily basis. Or an even better option, if you have it, is if you have a payroll provider that offers that online time clock. That's the easiest way, where they can log in via their computer or on their app on their phone when they start for the day, when they take their lunch. That's really important. And at the end of the day. Other things that you can do just to be very proactive on this issue is send out your handbook again to your employees. Not everybody reads it page by page when they first get it at orientation, right? So send out your handbook, or at least the section on meal and rest breaks and overtime, so that employees are advised again, hey, I'm entitled to a 30-minute lunch and 2 15-minute breaks. Clarify the expectation on overtime. Are employees allowed to just work overtime and report it after the fact, or do they need to request it before they actually work it? And then who do they request the overtime from? Who do they actually email? So put that in writing in an email to your employees so it's very clear. And then finally, you want to make sure that your employees know who to contact if there is an issue with their pay, right? If they get their paycheck and they think that there were hours owed or overtime owed, who do they go to? make sure they have the email or phone number of that person, and really take a proactive approach to this rather than just saying they're at home, it's not my fault if I can't track their time. As an organization, you are responsible for it, and doesn't change in a remote work site. Michelle, Stephen, anything else to add?
No, I think that's good.
From a manager perspective, I would also make sure that they don't manipulate the hours. So if your employee worked overtime or didn't take a lunch and has that reflected on their time sheet, you need to pay them for those hours. You can counsel them for not taking their lunch or incorrectly doing overtime, but you need to actually pay them for the hours worked. Thereafter, you can address it, but you can't manipulate the time that the employee has shown.
I think that's an excellent point too. We forget right now, we're kind of giving everyone this benefit of the doubt, but I think to Stephen's point, there may be some employees who may try to take advantage of the system. So certainly, as Stephen was saying, you have to still compensate, but then you can counsel. You can also start to ask for what an employee does at the end of each day. Monitor their performance, their work product a little bit more, to make sure, okay, well, they had 8 hours and they only got through 2 of these, I don't know, widgets for the day, is that, but then my other employees are getting through 5 or 6. So, and sometimes even that, like asking employees to kind of document what they do, is enough of an incentive to prevent any kind of fraudulent time card activity. So great point, Stephen.
A follow-up question that has been submitted that is relevant right now. Devin, you were talking about a moment ago, we need to pay, probably pay internet or phone bill or things like that, especially if they're involuntarily working from home. The question is, and this is for all 3 of you, is there a standard guideline of reasonable reimbursement? In other words, a set percentage of an internet or cell phone bill. That's probably best practices. I've seen it all over the place, either a set amount or like 50% or 40%, but happy to hear what you guys have to say.
Yeah, I've seen the same thing. I've seen 50%. That seems to be common. Some will say, hey, depending on what else you do, because there's so many things involved now because you can get those package deals where you can get the cable and the internet and the phone, and it's like $30 or something. I don't know. So sometimes they'll say, hey, we'll do 50% of that, or we'll just give you a dollar figure. Some have said, I'll just reimburse you for $100 a month, and that will just cover whatever that covers. So it really depends, because everybody's got different packages and what kind of programs they want in their homes.
Eric, and if you don't mind, can I add another question on top of that? One question that I get a lot is after how long can I not reimburse an employee? So if they're required to turn their reimbursements every month and wait a year, do they need to legally pay them? And I say yes. However, again, it's a counseling opportunity where they're not following a guideline, but you need to pay them back as per the policy. But again, I would counsel them based on them not following the policy. Michelle, do you have anything to add in regards to that?
I agree with that. I agree with that 100%. Yeah. Have a policy and follow the policy, and then if it's not working, then this is a performance discussion for sure.
Absolutely right. Another follow-up question for you guys that's related to this question is, you know what, I'm going to answer this one. Question is, if our lunch period policy is 12 to 1 every day, do we need to track that on a timesheet? The answer is, for non-exempt employees, yes. For exempt employees, no. But yeah, you want to track that. And non-exempt employees should, quite frankly, be clocking out during their unpaid lunch period. Okay, there's that. Let's do the next one, which is, by the way, I'm going to be alerting our phenomenal production team, operations team. We are not doing this in the 1 hour period. This is going to go long. That's okay. How can we quote unquote stay present with our remote employees, Michelle?
I would say a lot of what already that you have said, Eric, but also what Devin was just talking about when we were talking about the policies and procedures. I mean, part of what happens is it doesn't, just because employees are working remotely, it doesn't absolve you from following local laws and, you know, local, state, and federal laws. You still have to follow those. You still have to do the best that you can to providing them with a safe work environment. But how do you stay present with them? The communication piece, again, that Eric talked about in the very beginning, is constantly communicating. I know I can share, even for our team, Eric has set up monthly and semi-monthly calls where we all get together. And those have been very valuable because, you know, as consultants, we are distanced from one another just by the nature of what we do. And so it's helped a lot because now we're even more distanced with all of what's happening with COVID, and having those meetings and bringing everybody together has helped create a sense of community and, you know, a sense to give you something else sometimes to talk about other than work, because sometimes we do. So I would say constantly communicating with your employees. Set up, for some, I've also had some clients where they have set up daily meetings with certain staff. It doesn't go long. It's usually 15 or 20 minutes, but it's just a way to connect. If you're worried about with non-exempt staff and the hours, I mean, you do need to pay them if they're working. You need to pay them for the hours that they work. But again, you don't have to have an hour-long meeting. You could just have a 15-minute catch up. The other thing is aside from setting up these regular meetings, is, you know, staying in contact via email. I know we're all inundated. The inbox is crazy, and the same thing with, you know, using your phones and doing text messages, but just sending a little bit of a note out there that says, hey, I was thinking of you today, making sure you've got everything you need, making sure the workload isn't too much. Hey, what's happening? Just checking in. And again, it can just be that quick. But the important thing is to communicate. This is the only thing that we can do right now when we're separated and so far apart, and everybody's got so many stressors in their worlds.
Oh, I think that's good. I have one client, private school, and the teachers were missing all having lunch together during their lunch period, just to talk and BS and what have you. And so they set up a Zoom 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock, whatever the lunch period is. And any teacher who wanted to join and have lunch and talk to everybody else could. Nobody from leadership was there. It was not required. It was clock out time. It was just providing a facility for people to replicate the best they can that kind of lunch period, which means a lot to people. I want to ask the three of you, because I don't know this, at least off the top of my head. There was a question. We were talking about reimbursement for cell phones, internet use, all that other stuff. And the question is, under what California guideline is reimbursement required? The business office of this client said it's not the case that reimbursement is required. So I don't know the guideline itself.
I don't know.
Okay, Stephen, why don't you go first?
No, I mean, I was just trying to clarify for remote work, or is this just per employees? I'm assuming it's for remote work.
Yeah.
I think, Michelle, you quoted, did you quote or maybe it was Devin, quoted that that the law
remote work
dictates that. So I think it was Devin or Michelle said that the that there's guidance in regards to the employer during this time period paying for a portion of the expense. Correct?
Yeah, I think it was Devin. So, but I do want to say that is a California thing, and it may be, and there may be certain locales within California that also require. I know that there are other states where it is not mandatory to reimburse. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And then Devin, I think you actually have where it's written that you have to do it.
I do, and I'm furiously trying to look it up right now. I believe it's based in case law as well. It's definitely, so Department of Labor provide guidance for all employees throughout the United States, but then the state law, I believe it's case law. I have to look. But whoever asked that, what's that?
No, I'm sorry to interrupt. Well, let's look that up. I don't want to practice law on this. I don't want to be too careful, but we'll look it up. But I think we answered the question the way the question needs to be answered, but thank you. But if you find it during the thing, Devin, text it over to me and we'll figure out how we're going to answer it. If that's okay. That's great. Thanks, guys. Okay. And if you can't find it, it's no big deal. Okay. Last series of submitted questions are about working on site. First one is, I can't even find the first one. I'll go get that in a second. Second one is, let's do the second one next, Stephen. How do you handle a management official not wearing a face mask in the office, leaving some staff to not feel safe?
So for that, first of all, I would have a meeting with everyone, setting clear expectations that this is a requirement for all staff members. Mm-hmm. And then I would also make sure that the senior management, the management staff serve as role models, because we want the staff to understand the importance, and they should also appreciate the staff as another human being. This is really critical to someone's well-being, someone's livelihood, someone's life. In the event that a management member is not doing that, I would meet with them individually to find out why there was reluctance. It could be possibly because there's a disability-related reason. If that's the case, I would start the interactive process through ADA to find out the reason why and the legitimacy, and also what accommodations would need to be made in regards to this specific request. If that's not the case, and the manager simply is refusing to do it, I would let him or her know that basically this is a condition of employment. If they continue not to do it, they would be subject to counseling or termination. Again, I look at this very strongly as we're dealing with people's lives. We're dealing with a pandemic. We're dealing with a virus that can be spread. So you don't want to impact someone in a negative way. And if you're refusing to do something that is a safety measure that's put in place to protect your co-workers, I look at that as a very, very strong warning and violation of something that is meant to protect all individuals. So, Michelle, Devin, did you have anything that you would like to add to that?
I like what you had, and again, you know, management is your representative of how what you want happening with your staff, and so if you're not going to follow the rules, then that leaves a huge gap in best business practices, and can be very risky.
If this is, everybody has a boss, with the exception of a business owner. So if it's a CEO of an organization, that means they report to a board. If it is a business owner, I don't have advice for you other than if you're not safe, you might want to escalate that to the HR department or something along those lines. Couple of people have written in, it's California Labor Code section 2802 regarding reimbursement of employee expenses. So California Labor Code 2802. So now Devin and I don't have to frantically spend the next half an hour trying to drag that out. Thank you for that stuff. And the question I skipped over due to technical difficulties, because I'm not as good as PowerPoint as I claimed to be with Devin earlier. The question that we skipped over is, can employers require an employee to be tested for COVID-19? Can employers require an employee to be tested?
Yes. I would refer to orders that for the county or location that you're in. So specifically looking at Los Angeles, the order states that all employees who have contact with the public or other employees during their shifts are offered at no cost a cloth face covering. The covering is to be worn by the employees at all three. The covering is to be worn by the employees at all times during the workday when in contact or likely to come in contact with others. Employees need to wear a cloth face covering when the employee does not need to wear a cloth face covering when they're alone or in a private office or a walled cubicle. Employees are instructed to wash their face coverings daily. So that's, again, for Los Angeles. For any other areas that are outside of Los Angeles, I would, again, refer you to the public health orders for your city or your local area or
Good.
county.
All right, thanks, Stephen. Last question on working on site. Devin, this is for you. How should we treat employees 65 and older and those with pre-existing conditions? This is actually not one question, it's three questions. What about employees with compromised immune systems? And should we allow them back? Devin?
Sure. So I think the key to this question is the last section, right? Should we allow them back? So there's two pieces to understand here. Again, for LA County, the health officer in the most recent order has said that they strongly recommend that all employers offer telework or other accommodations to persons who are age 65 and older, and all people of any age who have an active or unstable pre-existing conditions. However, counter to that is EEOC, who just came out with updated guidance that warns employers on discriminating against employees, right, because of their age or because of their pre-existing conditions. So what's important to know is you can certainly offer telework, but you want to make sure that those employees come to you first. So don't assume, don't run a report from your payroll provider and look at all the birth dates and say, okay, anybody born in this year or below, we aren't going to allow them to come back. We're going to make sure that they're at home because those employees may want to be on site. There are, even though, there are ways to make working remotely very similar to working on site, they may still prefer to be on site. You don't want to discriminate against that. So definitely let those employees voice those concerns to you, and then you can look at this as an accommodation. The other thing is, because I think most recently there's 12 identified comorbidities, and obviously age and obesity, which is on the list, those are more visual. You can identify those, right? But a lot of the other comorbidities you can't necessarily see. You don't know if somebody has a lung condition or not. And so you don't want to just focus on the ones you can see and forget about those employees who have comorbidities that may want an accommodation. So again, put this on the employee to come to you first and say, I have some issue that makes me more prone to a severe reaction to COVID, and here's my medical documentation to support it, and I'd like to be accommodated by working from home. This is kind of a tangent to this question, but a lot of clients who have come to us asking for advice are starting to, cross the line into making medical decisions for their employees. And I really encourage you to draw that line hard in the sand and let employees come to you. Let employees come to you with medical documentation. Don't try and, say, I think this is safer for you because of, the fact that you have this. Don't play doctor in this role. So I don't know, Stephen and Michelle, if you want to add anything further to this.
No, I think that's good.
Yeah.
All right. Next one, working on site. Same thing happened. I apologize again. Let's go to the second one. This is going to be, what should you do if someone is sick with a fever? Who is this? Is this Stephen?
Michelle.
Okay.
Oh, is it me?
I can handle it.
We can all answer them. Again, I'm going to go back to the protocols that I talked about in the beginning. This depends on what kind of protocols you set up. So if someone is sick with a fever and they've disclosed it to you and they're at home, then the natural response is going to stay home. I mean, we would say that anyway, with or without COVID. You wouldn't want someone coming in to the office with a fever. If they have come into the office and you suspect that they have a fever, you can take their temperature. There are many of those where it's not a thermometer style, it's those infrared laser type temperature readers that you just point it toward the forehead and it will read it. And then of course, if that happens, then you want to send them home immediately because again, Devin mentioned this, we're not doctors and we're not here to make medical decisions, but Having a fever is one symptom of COVID. It could be other things. And so employers do have the right to send the employee home. And then there is, I believe, a waiting period too for, I think I don't know, we talked about this, Stephen, I think you said 72 hours. It's either like 48 or 72 hours. We're not sure exactly. But there's a waiting period for when they have to not have the fever before you can have them return. But again, set this up in your protocols and communicate it so it's very clear when you send them home. That's why you're doing it.
So 72 hours without any fever-reducing medication.
72, okay.
Based on the last information that we have.
Okay, good.
And I would just add too that you can always ask your employees to provide medical documentation. When we first started conducting these webinars, I don't remember when, I think the thought back then was we didn't want to send employees to urgent cares or to doctor's office waiting rooms because that would increase the exposure. But right now there are so many ways to access medical care virtually. Whether your provider offers telehealth or even they have minute clinics at CVS. If you can get your employee to at least, who has the fever, have a conversation with some kind of medical provider, and then a medical provider is saying, I think you're clear after 72 hours, or based on what you've told me, I don't think you're risk, and therefore you're safe to come back. Having that document that says your employee is safe to come back to work is an extra layer of protection for an organization. It's not always something that an employee can get their hands on, but definitely if you can encourage your employees to do that, it's just one more safeguard for you.
Good. A question just came in live. If you send an employee home for that fever or being sick, can you force them to take sick time off, or are we required to let them work from home?
I mean, I can start off. I'm sure you guys, I'm sure Stephen and Devin, you got some points to add to this. You don't have to require them to use their sick time. If they have it, it would behoove them to use it. You don't have to pay them for it. If they do have the capability to work from home, you could always, keep that capability for them. But if someone's sick, they're sick, and you're not. I would caution. I think it's a risk. If someone's sick, I think you should remove them from that responsibility of working, no matter what. No matter whether they're at home and have the capability or not. If they're sick, they should be able to spend time healing themselves and not have to worry about what's going on in the workplace, regardless of whether they have the capability to work from home or not. And if they have PTO or sick time and they don't want to use it, that's their call. I wouldn't say you should force it upon them, but if it's available, then that allows them the time at home and to have it be paid. If it's COVID related and it confirms that it's COVID related, then you've got to go through the expanded sick time leave, which is the 80 hours. And so all that would have to be looked at on a one-off basis. So it depends on what this fever leads to, if it leads to COVID or not. But that's kind of my 2 cents. What do you guys think?
I think that, and I was having this conversation with a client last night, all of this is going to be a case-by-case situation, right? You may have an employee who has a mild fever, but they want it, they're doing the right thing, staying at home, and in that interim period, they feel fine and they want to work. So certainly you can allow them to work remotely if their position allows it, right? They might be in a position where they can't do their work at home. But the point I kind of wanted to make is that all of these questions are fantastic questions. And yes, there is a need for organizations to wrap their arms around the what ifs. But, you can have general ideas of what you think you should do, but you have to also remember it's going to be a case-by-case basis and everything's going to change. As Eric said at the start of this presentation, this is the advice for today. So as you start to prepare for reopening, maybe you're not reopening for a month, all of this could potentially go out the window based on a change in COVID, a change in regulations. So just be really mindful of that. I think to answer the question, which Michelle did, is yes, you can, but certainly it depends on the situation, on the position, on the employee, and the circumstances.
Okay, good. Last submitted question. What should we do if an employee has been exposed to an individual outside the workforce who is tested positive? There is guidelines on this. Who wants to answer this one?
Can start, and then Michelle and Devin can jump in. What I would do is first of all, I would let the staff know, I would let everyone know that in the event that they come into contact with someone, bring it to a manager or someone in management's or HR's attention. That's ideal. I mean, you should communicate that information. You should go home. If you're at work, you should contact your primary care. If you're tested and your test's negative or positive, you need to follow those guidelines. However, with a negative test, the incubation time period is 0 to 14 days. So even though you test negative, you should self-quarantine for up to 14 days. Thereafter, you can be released by a doctor, or you're presumed to be okay and to return to work. Michelle, Devin, did you have anything in regards to that?
No, I agree with that.
Because
I mean, it's pretty clear what is expected to have happen.
And this is definitely going to happen as we return to work and we have more cases. This is going to happen. Hopefully not in every company or every situation, but it's definitely something that is going to come up.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that it's a personal decision by the company to decide when to notify other employees. So if somebody has been exposed but hasn't been confirmed positive yet, CDC does not require employers to then notify coworkers, right? So what CDC's recommendation is, once you know an employee is positive, they have clear regulations as to who then you notify. So you look at who the individual who tested positive had close contact with for a significant period of time. Those coworkers, you have to advise them that they may have been exposed. You obviously maintain the confidentiality of the employee who tested positive. You never release their name, although some people may be able to figure it out. And then whether you require those employees to be quarantined or required to be tested, again, requires what type of contact they had with the employee. CDC defines it as close contact within 6 feet for a prolonged period of time without a mask. So with this question, my only thought is, be cautious about, we know an employee is exposed to someone who tested positive. We don't know that they're positive yet. I'm not sure you want to go and notify everybody right then. You may want to wait and see what happens with that employee first. It's a personal decision by the organization, and definitely, something that you're going to have to thoughtfully think about first.
Yeah, the one thing I'd like to add to that, and I think that's a good point, but remember the incubation time period is 1 to 14 days. So, I would definitely be in contact with that employee throughout that time period. If they feel like if they didn't retest, although start to have symptoms, then, it's starting to look more problematic and more of a possibility. But that's a good point, Devin. Thank you.
And you can always, sometimes employees just need some guidance. They may not even know where to go get a test. If you've got resources available for your employees, this can be coordinated by HR. Here's the closest testing facility. I haven't personally been tested, but I know many people who have, and I heard it's a very simple process, and believe it's free as well. So certainly just giving them that guidance, they can go the next day, get a test, and then be directed by a provider as to when they can return, so that you get more information quicker that way.
Okay, guys, we got 3 questions. We've been answering a lot of live questions throughout. So here's the first question. And I'm rereading this again, and if you guys don't say I don't know, I'm going to be really shocked, because I don't want to do it. In regards to vaccination, what do you think that will look like if an employee doesn't want to get vaccinated, doesn't believe in vaccination, or is hesitant in getting vaccinated? And my first response is, I can't wait till we get to a point where we have to make that decision. That means we have vaccines and they're available. That's a long way out. But I don't want to speculate that I've seen no guidance unless you guys have on that.
No.
I haven't seen any, and it ultimately will be way over all of our heads as to how that gets decided. So.
Okay.
100% agree. That's, can we just push that off to attorneys?
Attorneys would like that. They can bill hours for that.
Yeah.
All right. Next question is, if a person just doesn't feel comfortable coming back, they know we have protocols in place, they don't have childcare or health-related issues, they're just concerned about coming back to work. How flexible can we be if we need staffing coverage? Can we part ways with the employee? Is it a termination or layoff, or are they quitting?
So I can, go ahead, Michelle.
No, go ahead.
So I am in the midst of dealing with a client with this very similar issue. And, I think it's a two-parter. First and foremost, here's that word again, you want to be empathetic to that employee. Coming in and saying, too bad, so sad right now is not going to be a helpful approach. You want that employee to feel heard. You want to listen to their concerns first and foremost. Then I would, in that conversation, go over in depth the policy that you have that Michelle was alluding to of what the organization is doing, all of the measures, the expectations of the employees, and walk them through that so that maybe during that conversation, they get that level of comfort that they need to come back. And then the third, I guess there's three parts. The third part is then saying, if you have a health condition, here is the reasonable accommodation process. But in that conversation about a reasonable accommodation, that's kind of where you firmly kind of say, this is the only real reason why we're going to make you come back, right? It's got to be because of an accommodation that's rooted in medical documentation, because we are a business in which we need employees here. Now, if you're a business where you've been able to operate remotely and your employees are able to perform 100% of their work remotely, that may be a different story. You're going to have a good reason as to why you want to bring employees back right now. But if it is better to have employees on site for business reasons, then again, have that conversation, listen to them, lay out all of what you're doing, and then if that doesn't work, fall back on if you need an accommodation, that's kind of the only way you're going to be excused from having to come back to the work site. Stephen, Michelle?
No.
I think that sounds good.
All right. Can we make a policy? I just dealt with this. Can we make a policy that our staff needs to turn on their cameras during our remote Zoom staff meetings?
You probably can make a policy. Is it illegal or illegal? I mean, I guess I would wonder why. Michelle, Devin, do you have any thoughts?
Well, I think the reason why is because, you're concerned that your employees are not paying attention, right? That they're doing something else. And as a mother with a 3-year-old in the next room, that's a fair concern. But right now, this isn't the time to, push back on that. So I think if you first just let your employees know that, number one, you don't care what they look like. You don't care what's in the background. You don't care if there's background noise, because we're all in this very unique situation, that may be, enough for them to say, okay, I'm going to turn on my camera. So before you get to that forceful route, I would just say, can we kind of change the culture so people feel more comfortable? Because I do think seeing face-to-face is a lot more effective than, seeing, I don't know what happens when you turn your camera off on Zoom or whatever platform you're using. So in terms of whether you can enforce it, it's a great question. I don't know the legal ramifications of enforcing it. I don't know. Michelle, have you seen anything?
Well, I'm not going to answer legally. I don't know of anything, and I don't know. I'm not looking at from a non-legal perspective. It is a requirement. Again, is this what you need to do, and your business is requiring it that you show up. then yeah, then you have it as part of your policy, and you can performance manage people who choose not to use the Zoom. Now, they may tell you that they don't have that capability in the computer that they have at home, and so you may be responsible for providing them with a functioning computer or camera or something. But other than that, I mean, can you make it a requirement? Yes, you can. And can you performance manage them if they refuse not to? I personally, though, as Eric knows, there are times where I don't want to be on the Zoom screen. So for me, just from a personal standpoint, I'd be like, what? You're going to require this? I'd probably still do it, Eric, if you asked me to.
And generally, just so my practice with stuff is, I like to see people. I prefer it. Having said that, if I have team members who are going to participate in this, I want to see you. With the internal staffing meetings, I'm less concerned about that stuff. It doesn't really bother me. So last question. There's an employee who is allowed by the company to work from home, but does not have adequate space at home to work. They have a small non-ergonomic table, and it doesn't work for that person. I know what my answer would be, but I'd be interested. Stephen, what do you think? So person is allowed to work from home, they just don't have a place to work adequately.
Michelle, didn't you have, I'm not to pass the back, but I thought, Michelle, didn't you have a situation like this?
We did.
Very good. I'll turn it over to Michelle for her expertise in ergonomic environments.
We did. Yeah, there was a client, and the employee was completely fine with working from home, everything like you said, but yeah, they were sitting at a table where it wasn't the right size, and it was causing their neck, when they were working on the computer, it was causing their neck to be strained. And they worked it out. The employee and the employer worked it out, and they found one of those very desks, the ones that can raise up or lower, and it was very affordable. They didn't go with the $1,000 one or anything. I think it only ended up being $50, but it satisfied that, and the employer was happy to do it, and the employee was very happy, and it all worked out. But yeah, this again, an area that I'm not an expert on is workers' comp, but if you can help with trying to achieve an ergonomic workspace for people who are working from home, I would try to get there as best as you can, because I don't know what the risk and exposure is going to be, and that's where you would want to talk to your workers' comp carrier.
All right. Michelle, Devin, Stephen, great job. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And our wonderful, well, that went out fast. Try that one more time. Those are our websites. Lots of information there for you. So thank you to Michelle and Devin and Stephen. Thank you to all of you to participate. And behind the scenes, we have an incredible operations team led by Jamie Baker and Deborah Shimajima, Nicole Greenwood, Tiffany Takamoto-Raymond. I want to thank you guys all very much for your time and your effort in doing this. We will see you soon. We will be doing a diversity inclusion webinar in about 2 weeks. If you signed up for our newsletters, you're going to get a copy of that. We look forward to seeing all of you then, and thank you again for your time. Bye.
Bye.